Hey guys, welcome to the Linux course, and in this session we'll be understanding file permissions. Now let's get started with the session. So first, ownership of Linux file. So when you create a file, basically in a Linux system, you have three types of owners. One is the user, which right now in my Linux system it's IntelliPad. It's a user, and then there is groups are basically you can create a group and add in some users and give them some permissions, so that give that group some permissions, so all that users will have only those permissions. And then finally others and processes. So processes in the sense, when a process is running, that process might require a particular resource to work on a particular file to use for that particular process, so that process should be given permission to use that particular file. So these are the three different types of owners. So you can see the purpose of users and groups or for access and permissions. So let's say if there are no users and groups, then anyone can log into your system and anyone can use any file, access any file. Even if you're the owner, like if I'm the owner of a file, you can log into the system and you can change the contents of that file, which is not good for me because it's my file and I want that content. So for that you have users and groups. So if my user logs in and creates that file, only my user will be given owner permissions. Only I can edit that file and you cannot edit it because you're a different user. Now every user has their own directory. Every user have their own directory, usually with /home/username. So under /home you will have a directory with your username. In our particular virtual machine, you saw that /home/IntelliPad. IntelliPad is the user which we created. So basically this particular user has a directory under their name. And then even processes need permission to access specific files and locations. Yes, so while some process is running, obviously that process will have the permission to use a particular file or log into or go into a particular location and access a file. So these are the three different types of owners. Now, what is the difference between a user and a group? So first, user, owner of the file. And then, so these are not the differences. These are basically the characteristics of users and groups. So first, let us see the users. So users, again, the owner of the file. And then system uses user IDs to manage users. So let's say there are 100 different users and in that 10 people have the same name. So the system will not understand that if all of them have the same name, it will think they're all the same user. So to differentiate between the users, the system has its own identity. So system has its own identity scheme which uses user IDs. So every user will have their own unique user ID. Whenever that particular user is working on the system will check for the user ID and it will know who exactly is working on the system right now. And then the system identifies daemon processes as users. So daemon processes are background processes, and system will assume that a background process is running because a user has induced it. Because mostly it is the user who is inducing it. Only if user switches on to the system, only then those background processes will start to run. So now groups contains two or more users. So all users in the group have same permissions as given to the group. So let's say you've created a group, or let's now not assume group. So let's say now you have 10 users. In that 5 users are database admins. Now all of the database admins need the same kind of permissions. So instead of providing every single user the same permissions, you can create a group, add these 5 users to that particular group and give that group those permissions. So once you give that group that permissions, it will be applied to all the users under that particular group. So that is why groups are used. And then finally, groups are identified by GID. Like how users are identified by user IDs, groups are identified by group IDs. Now, others and processes. A process can open a file and even read or write in a file. Yeah, it can, if provided with enough permissions. And if a process is using a file and we delete it, it does not get deleted. So what does this sentence exactly means? Let me explain it to you. So while you're using while a process is running and it is using a particular file, so while that process is running, you're basically deleting that file. You would see that that file is not available in the system, but the file will not be deleted. It will be just deleted blatantly from the top, but from the memory it will not be erased. Only when the process is complete and the result is successful, or if it is failed, only only when the process is complete, that particular file will be deleted from the memory. Because if you delete that file while that process is happening and you stop that process, that is not beneficial for the process as well as the user. So this is what happens while a process is using a file. And finally, there are three types of user IDs: effective user IDs, real user IDs, and saved user IDs. So we look at these user IDs in detail. Okay. So first, effective UID. So an effective UID and a real user UID is basically the same once you log into the system, because IntelliPad, the user which I created, and the root are the same person, and the UID will be the same because I'm logged into the same system and I'm using both the super user privileges and the normal user privileges. That is super user in the sense when I use sudo su or sudo -s to become the root. And in most of the time while you're running a process, effective UID is used. So effective UID in the sense your normal UID of the user. So the system will understand which user is exactly trying to access this particular process or which user is attempting this process using the effective UID. And the real user UID comes into play only when you're shifting the user from your normal user to the root user. So while you're doing that, it will check for the UID. It will check for whether the effective UID and the real user UID is the same or not. If it is the same, then it will accept and move ahead, because sometimes using the normally without super user privileges, when you're trying to execute something, it might fail and ask for the it might say it does not allow because super user privileges are not provided. But once you use sudo in front of it and provide the password for it, it will work. So how this basically works is, while you're normally using it, it will take the effective UID and it will assume you do not have those permissions. But once you provided sudo and the password, it will assume that you are root, and even though you are root, you will have the same UID because you're just shifting from the normal user to the root user. And finally, saved user UID is basically once the system knows it's the same user, and then it will be automatically saved, and then once you hit sudo su and the password, it will automatically change the user privileges. So that's what saved user UID is. The first time it might ask you that are you the same user, please enter the password. But once you've done that, after that it will not ask, it will directly ask for the password and you can move ahead. So these are processes. Moving ahead, now let's create a user and groups so that we can understand better. So let me open my system. So first let me log into it, and okay, so right now internet is not connected. I don't know why I need internet, but still I'll connect it. Okay, so first you can see this, and so this is the user which I'm logged in right now, and you can see this W, it's the same thing. And let me clear this. Okay, so right now I'm logged in as IntelliPad. So there is currently only one user, because going back under home there is only one particular user, which is IntelliPad, because we've not created any other user. So now what we are going to do is we are going to create another user to accompany IntelliPad. So let's create IntelliPad number 2, IntelliPad 2, and to create that user, it's pretty simple. It's sudo user add username. So let's go back to the terminal, sudo user add and username IntelliPad 2, and enter the administrator password. Now it is done. So now if you go back to home, now you can see there are two different folders, IntelliPad and IntelliPad 2, because you have created a new user. So we've created another user right now, and that's fine. Now let me enter into IntelliPad 2. So permission denied. So let me do a sudo, and I'm still not able to enter into it. I think we'll have to log in before trying to enter it. Okay, that's fine. So right now our second step was to create a group. So again, it's the same process to create a group: sudo group add and group name. I'm going to name it as group 1. So I've created a group. So you can already see there is a group called IntelliPad and there is a group called Wheel, and we have created a group right now. So one more thing. So right now, let's try to do something. Let's try with file permissions. We have created a user and a group. This is how we create. So I just wanted to show that first. Now let's try one thing. Now going back. So first let's try to cat/etc/shadow. So permission has been denied. So going to our PPT, you can see here it won't work. But right now with a sudo cat etc/shadow. So now you can see it has displayed all the contents under it. So why I wanted to show is this is where permissions come in. So you might be thinking how it happens with sudo, because I've done this a lot. Sometimes I do it normally, permission will be denied, but then I'll use sudo and enter the password, then it will work. You might be wondering why it is, but basically it is just permissions. Normally, a user will not have permissions to view the contents of an etc shadow folder, but a super user or a root user will have the privileges to see that. So that's what happened over there. So now, one more thing is how to get super user privileges. It's pretty simple. Hit sudo and su, or so you can see now it's not asking for the password. Go so exit, or you can do sudo -s. So both are the same. Sudo su and sudo -s are the same. So now we are logged in as the root user. So now let us try. So now you can see I'm able to enter the folder IntelliPad 2. But as the user IntelliPad, I did not have permissions to enter IntelliPad 2 because it is a different user, and that user has not provided me permissions to access his folder. Okay, now I'm the root user. So now you can see I can just type in cat etc shadow and I will be provided with the result. Yeah, you can see this. So I'm provided with the result. So why I'm provided with the result is because I'm the root user, I'm the super user, and I have the privileges and permissions to do this. So let me clear this and let's go back to the slides. So this is how it works. Now coming down. So now root, let's look at the root, and it is the directory at the top of the hierarchy. So we have a file system hierarchy in Linux, and root is the top of the hierarchy because root is the first directory. Under root there are everything else. In a Linux system, root is the main directory. Under root there are so many directories which are for so many different operations, but root is the main directory which is at the top of the hierarchy. So it then has a root like structure and under it containing multiple directories and files. So it is the ground level. Root is the ground level, and under root there are so many different branches going under which forms different file structures. So that is how it got the name root, and this is the symbol of root. A backslash is the symbol of root. Coming down, so guys, this is how the file structure will be. So you can see this is a top folder root, and under root you will see all of these major folders. You can see all these major folders over here. So bin, etc, sbin, usr, var, dev, home, lib, mnt, opt, proc, and root. So we'll discuss them in detail in the next session. Now thank you for attending this session.